Vena is a lawyer that specializes in access to justice, governance, and rule of law, and has 10 years of professional experience in the justice and law order sector and civil society. She has been our go-to person each time we seek to engage communities, whether it's land issues, whether it's training district people, whether it's the district land board, the area land committees. It's been Bena that has been giving that support. So thank you very much, Bena. As you can see, we have a very rich panel. I'll quickly get into the questions. I'll start with you, Santa. Right? On what do you see as successful community-led initiatives that have made a significant impact for women there in Lira, in their achievement of equality?
What we, grassroots women rights activists, actually did in Lira. The first one is that the grassroots women's rights activists successfully lobbied for the establishment of water in one of the health centers where there was no water completely. You know, it happened that whenever the government is to install water, the land must be given free. But when the owner of the land realized that some money must be given to him, then we actually lost hope. But fortunately enough, the grassroots activists had to lobby with the owner of the land, and indeed the land was given and water was constructed. It was drilled and everything was completed, and as we speak now, water is there for the maternity for women in that health center. And also, we lobbied through the councillors for that area to actually have its vote allocated in the budget allocation for that water source to be compensated for the owner of that land. Another issue that actually the grassroots women actually did, they successfully mobilized for the petition, which was actually given to the RDC. We petitioned the office of the RDC because, you know, when you look at the National Security Act, it says that whenever the security meeting is to take place in either a district or a sub-county or in any institution, you find that when the RDC for that district is a man and the DPC is a man, because there are people who are supposed to be in the committee, and such positions are always taken by men. So in that National Security Act, it says that whenever, it says there is somewhere where the chairperson of the security can really nominate somebody to be in that, can co-opt somebody to be in that security meeting. So we petitioned the office of the RDC that at least that portion of the act, of the sub-regulation, if at all it can nominate a woman to be in that committee, it will help at least women to push in their the challenges that they have. So those are the areas, the main key areas that we actually lobbied. Another one, what the grassroots women did, we actually lobbied for the radio talk shows so that our women at the grassroots there can really listen to what really FIDA is doing. Because they did this as a result of the training that was conducted in Lira for all the women activists who attended the training. So we lobbied for that radio talk show, and every Mondays from 5 to 6, you find all these women activists on the radio, and at times we give our coordinators also to go and respond to a few questions that activists cannot actually respond to. Other areas, we lobbied for the renovation of the schools and with Plan Uganda. We lobbied whereby a very, very big school was renovated, and we lobbied that if at all they can put there the counseling center and the washroom for girls, and indeed it happened so. The school was renovated and the washroom was put there for women, where the senior woman teacher actually goes and do her work, and the washroom is there, very, very well constructed for our girls in the school.
Thank you so, so much. I think Santa deserves for delivering clearly some of the initiatives that she and the group in Lira have been participating in. I think it's commendable to see that when we say we are trying to create some sort of sustainability, enhance resilience of communities, this is the nature of work that we are doing. So thank you very much, Santa. We don't take for granted that you are all the way in Lira, but we are able to see the fruits of the work that you and the other women are organizing with are doing. I'll move next to Doreen. Doreen, for you, what do you see as the specific barriers to gender equality faced by women in rural and underserved communities? And please feel free to speak from whichever community that you come from that you're most familiar with.
Thank you very much, Elizabeth. And I'll start with a quote by Rebecca Solnit. Change happens from the bottom up, in small groups of people doing small things in the face of huge institutional inertia. And those small acts can become a wave that changes the world. Now, talking about barriers specifically, there are very many. But to give some of the key highlights of these barriers, we as grassroots activists face a lot of shrinking civic space. The shrinking civic space in an era where digital activism and communication channels really are to enable us to communicate, to share our experiences at the grassroots. But this, because of shrinking civic space, the threats that do come in, they create that fear in us. So it is really, really impending to our activities as grassroots activists. I'll give an example. When I took snapshots of the channel in Bwaise that had not been constructed, and yet when floods really came, they even killed a young baby. Property was destroyed and all that. And then I got a message afterwards, like Doreen Otulabisa, sort of. And so this really is creating a lot in us, and it is one barrier that we are facing as activists. Then number two, limited access to education. You'll find that most of the grassroots people are not that educated. And so when it comes to, for example, say gender responsive budgeting at the council and all that, most of the women will fear going there. They will ask us a lot of questions. Doreen, what are we going to say? Oluzungu lungi, so all that. So you'll find that they will stay behind because of the Luzungu. They cannot express themselves. So it is really it is also an issue that is a stand block to gender equality. Then the other issue that grassroots people are facing is lack of digital literacy. Doreen, being privileged that I can get on my Twitter handle and then write up something, most of the women cannot do that. We have these Kabiriti phones and all that, and therefore I'm the one to come in, for instance, say in different families in Kawempe when there is sort of domestic violence and that, you'll find that getting this evidence, getting like what you mentioned before about the land evictions in Bwaise, I was a foot soldier hiding in a corner trying to get all that. But most of the women cannot really use their smartphones to give out that information. So lack of digital literacy has also impeded gender equality. Then the other issue is about lack of economic dependency. You'll find that so many government wealth programs are in place, EMIOGA, PDM, but these things are male-dominated. The parish chief and all that, the secretariat that is in control of EMIOGA, for example, is 80% male. So you find that when this money, for example, came to Kawempe division, women were told to give some percentage, and yet, so you find that it is really limiting people. Come to our market, lack of economic dependence. You find that most of these women, for example, in Nakawa market where I operate more, there are so many presumptive taxes, and yet they are selling these perishable goods and all that. So you find that it is really, it limits their independence and decision making even at home. So it's it's among the problems that is limiting the progress to gender equality. Then lastly, legal and policy barriers. In so many instances, legal frameworks may not adequately protect women's rights. For example, there are so many young women that I represent. Most of the women go abroad. They've gone to Saudi Arabia to search for jobs, get a living and all that. And also even in the factories, for example, in Kawempe, the casual young women who clean, who do all those work, like all that work, they are paid less. They undergo a lot of, sexual violence at the workplace. And when you go there, they will tell you that, you Doreen, for us we have work committees in place, but they are not active. They intimidate these girls. So all this really limits the progress towards gender equality. So breaking barriers is building a gender-just society. We should look at different ways on how we can break these barriers to enable really moving from commitment to investment. Thank you, Elizabeth.
Thank you so much. And Doreen, we already see you and the team investing your time. Doreen was on the phone close to 3 hours the whole time. Each picture she would send. So I think that's already an investment that you're making. We'll move to Christine. We are running out of time. Let's kindly try to keep our responses within 3 minutes so that we can take a bit of questions from the audience. So Christine, for me here, would like to hear from you what you see as examples or initiatives that at a grassroots level that provide solutions or that have successfully promoted gender equality. And because you work with the government, it would be interesting to hear from this other end, away from maybe Santa, where she operates, what are those that you continue to see the innovative ways the local government is linking with the grassroots?
Thank you, Elizabeth, and everybody here. I want to observe protocols. My name is Christine Anono. I work as District CDO of Lira. I want to run quickly on what we do as government and what we've seen that has brought results that we can stand out and talk about. The community we work with want to be talked to again and again and again. So we've done a number of outreaches. We carried out, I feel we've done advocacy. From early 2000, we did a lot of advocacy, and women came out to access whatever space they were given. So dialogues, specific dialogues on issues that come out that prevent women from enjoying access to gender equality, we've done that. We also carried out a number of legal aid clinics. An example of the legal aid clinics resulted in one of the communities in Aromo sub-county. They demanded that they want the Domestic Violence Act to be unpacked. The women demanded, they wanted it to be unpacked to them so that they know what provisions the act gives. So that was something that it means they know what they want, and they know if the laws are there to protect them, they needed to know very well. We do community policing. We did a lot of community policing during the early 2000s. We came to, now we've started doing it again, and we do it as a team with police. We could manage to take the OCCID, we even take the DPC, we could take them out to talk to the community, and people got to know what they're supposed to do and ask all the questions that they need to. We specifically did gender self-awareness in schools because we talk about the women and we think the parents or maybe the elders talk to the children, but we now talk to the children to provide self-awareness so that they can also provide self-protection from abuse. So we reach schools and talk to children, the girls and boys, so that we give the boys the responsibility to join hands with the girls to protect them. In other words, providing gender self-awareness. And this, the girls keep it. If you leave your contact and she's going through something, she will call. This and this is happening, what do I do? That means it's a solution that is giving them the opportunity to express themselves and to seek for help. And then we do vocational skills training. There are those who drop out. And then a lot of business skills training has happened. What has resulted in Lira, if you go out there, you will see women in the market. They carry to the market. But the only challenge is that when we advocated for women to come up and pick up the economic space, the men folded their hands. Now everything is on them, but they've never given up. We even keep telling them, never give up. And girl children are going to school. If you go to schools, the girls are many as a result of such. So those are the kind of solutions. There are very many and they're determined. If you talk to them, they are encouraged. And when you go for school outreaches, you will see the girls sit in front and the boys sit behind there. Even community engagements, when you go there, the men will sit out there, and when they sit from behind, they sit with folded hands. The women will sit in front and ask questions. So the women, the outreaches that we've done, that's why at the beginning I said they need to be talked to again and again and again to remind them, to help them realize the potentials in them.
Okay.
Economic empowerment has happened. Women initiated the VSLA themselves. Then government started coming in. Now the banks are running to the VSLA because it is disabling the banks. They run to the women groups and loan them money. And so that they lend to themselves and that. And even every week you see them going to the groups. As early as 7, you find them seated in meetings with bank officials, collecting the money they're supposed to pay back. When they're done, they're given like that. So that initiative is very good. So that means that women need money. They need resources to move on, but it's yet not enough. And then with the IGS that has come, and government programs are there, very many, YLP, WEP, and Myoga has come. Women are getting there. They are getting there. We only need to support them more to make them get there. And then we have challenges. We've been challenging the traditional practices that are negative. The first woman who came out from Lango to stand as a clan head was last year, and people challenged her. But that was an achievement for us because it had never happened. And nobody has ever thought that a woman could come out and stand with the men to head a clan. But she was bulldozed. She was bulldozed, but that is an achievement. And I know other women want to do the same. And I want to give a personal experience. My husband is a clan head, but there is a woman in his executive. I have never seen him moving out without that woman because she's intelligent, she's strong, she knows. And always when he's going out for any difficult meetings in the community to sort out issues of the clan, that woman will always be there to support him. That means we've only not given the space, but the kind of advocacy we did has resulted into such women getting into the leadership of the clan. That had never happened. So those are the kind of solutions, because
Yes, Christine.
those
In
are
a
the
minute,
areas that
Christine.
most women are, the grassroots level. Those are the areas they can open doors and get to where we are. And then again, for them to get there, we need to keep the connection. The connection must be tight and flowing so that we get in touch with them again and again and again all the time. Because we don't have time, we could have talked a lot, But also, we've been creating space for women in every public function. We always create space for women to exhibit, to showcase that they are there, whatever they have, even services, products they have, we put tables for them to showcase, so that the public knows that women are around, because we are around. We are around. We want people to know that we are around, and we are still around. We shall continue to be around. So I want us to continue doing that. I want us not to leave the rural woman, the grassroots woman alone. We need to hold hands all the time. And one special thing I have noticed as I do community work, as I wind up, the single women who carry fruits in trays are buying land. They know they don't have husbands. When they go back to where they're born, they're not given. You hear them saying, I am saving money to buy land for my children. They are buying land, but some of the women who are married, because they have maybe access to land to dig, they've not thought that far. So these special women, the single women who carry trays around, need to be supported in whatever way, so that they are able to protect themselves and also keep the children they have. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Christine, highlighting some of the things that are happening in Lira. And next is Bana, really. And Bana is going to speak about strategies of effectively linking the work that Santa is doing, the work that Doreen is doing from that level, and the advocacy efforts there to the national and international policy making. Doreen earlier spoke about the fact that sometimes certain policies that we do have limit women's participation, either in the economy or protection of their rights. So maybe you could just share about those strategies. How do we make that linkage?
Thank you, Elizabeth. Good afternoon, everyone. Wow, these are powerful women. I think they deserve a round of applause, because they're speaking on behalf of the grassroots. We would not be here if it wasn't for the grassroots woman. So I think, to me, information is important. You cannot advocate for change when you do not have information. So for me, when it comes to advocacy, linking the grassroots woman, does this grassroots woman actually know her rights, her human rights? Does she understand her political rights? Does she understand her social rights? Does she understand her cultural rights? And of course, the economic rights. So information is key, not only for the grassroots woman, but also us who went to school. You know, we need to always, one of the key strategies I always employ, and I think that's what helped us when we were pushing for the amendment of the succession laws in Uganda. Statistics, the impact that if this law is not changed, how many women were losing out on their rights to land. Because we're talking about economic empowerment, we're talking about freedom to associate, but as Madame has mentioned, she mentioned the issue of access to land. But when you talk about ownership, that's a different conversation. So one of the things is information. We need to always conduct research. How does it impact on the grassroots woman, but even that woman out there who's actually feeling it? Research is important, both quantitative and qualitative. The second issue is that we need all actors. We need to work together. We need the men, we need the boys, we need the bishops, we need all actors in this conversation. Why? Because at the end of the day, each one of us has a role to play in ensuring that we advocate for gender equality. But this we not only needing one another, but we also need to train one another. Because when we talk about, there was a question in relation to the marriage bill. Where is it? Someone raised it and they pushed it to me. Where is it? The question I'll also ask myself, okay, where is it? Madame Rachel has joined us. She will not give feedback, But I'm saying that those are the questions we need to ask ourselves. Where did we go wrong? So that requires constant questioning, constant research. Maybe we can push for certain issues piecemeal while bringing the grassroots woman on board. My third and last point is in relation to money. I don't know how many development partners we have here. I know they'll keep on saying, we need money for these processes. We need money to conduct research. We need money to continue the engagements. We need money to actually push for the cause of gender equality. Not only as FIDA Uganda, but even the grassroots woman, to leave her home and come and attend your engagement without food. You know, sometimes it's difficult because she's thinking about her stomach. You're here thinking about gender equality, pushing for this change, pushing for this law. But there are certain aspects that we always have to be conscious of. We need money to push for all of these areas. We need money, basically. Then I think we have women of power, because we are talking about national. They are here. But at international level, we have women who are positioned in powerful positions. How do we tap on their expertise? How did they get there? We have our senior FIDA members. I'll give an example. We're talking about money. We have members who are part of IMF, the former Commissioner General of Revenue Authority, Madame Doris Akol. How can we tap on the space she's occupying to push our agenda? You know? Because that's where they're discussing. Women who are sitting at tables where decisions are being made. How are we tapping on their existence on those tables?
Thank you very, very much. I think Bena closes the panel with a very interesting point. Money, money, money. We are talking investment, and it could be money, it could be human resource. The truth of the matter, we need to be investing. And maybe just to add that, Bena, as we speak to the donors, the development partners, I think it's important, since we are talking about community, to reflect on what role and power we have as communities. I remember I went for a meeting sometime, and the facilitator opened by asking, how many weddings and baby showers have you contributed money to? How come we cannot collect this money for initiatives that help us as communities? And that's something perhaps I'll leave for us. And we do understand that we don't have the primary role of providing social services, for example, in this country. But how come we find the money to collect to do other things? Are we able to look into different organizing as women, the women's groups, the associations like ourselves here at FIDA? So that's important for us to think about. I want to give an opportunity to honestly just 2 people in a minute to ask questions. I don't know if they'd already been asked on the QR code, so that we just read those out. But if there is anyone with a burning question or comment, in a minute, please, to allow for us to create room for the next panel, to allow us. There's a hand here and another hand here. And they are both ladies. I think these are the ladies Christine was talking about. Where's the hand? Okay.
Thank you so much, panelists. It's been very educational hearing from you. I have a question and a comment. My first question is to Madame Christine. You kept talking about the important roles that the women have been opened to, and you kept saying, oh, they need support. So I would like to ask you, what kind of support do you think they need? What kind of help do they need? Do they need information? Do they need money? Is that something you can clarify on? And then my second, which is a comment, goes to Doreen, probably, because she spoke a lot about one of the barriers being like language barrier, digital illiteracy, and I'd personally recommend, I work in a grassroots organization. So one of the things that we've been able to do is create action teams that bring together the people in the community themselves so that they're able to because they know each other. These are problems that happen to them. They can easily go to one another. So what if we create, maybe let's say, gender action teams, where we have the people in the community, like Doreen, they don't have to be educated. They only have to have a common goal, which is to achieve gender equality. What if we did that? I think that would be pivotal in addressing issues like language barrier, illiteracy, because at the end of the day, they still need to be empowered. They still need to not be discriminated against. Thank you.
Sorry. Other hand was here. I think it was her.
Okay, thank you very much, everybody. It's been a wonderful time. And I just want to say this, that currently in Kampala International University, we have the Legal Aid Clinic, of which the students are the drivers. And that is why I'm even here with one of them. This is Immaculate, one of my students, and is a member of the KIU Legal Aid Clinic. So some of the things we do is we go out to interact with the community within and outside the campus. For example, we have a market outreach program, which we were actually supposed to take to go for this week, but we had to postpone because of continuous assessments, but these are some of the things we have in mind to go out there to do. We also have plans for the prison visit, and one of the strategies that we're looking at is for them to go in their own individual locations, even while on holiday, to go to the districts, to the prison offices around them, and then they talk to the inmates, and they will find a way to connect them to pro bono services and things like that. So I think even in all this too, making the best of students too is a very good tool, even as we go in this moving from commitment to investment, carrying them along. And I think it will go with the slogan of catch them young, as in bring them into this vision, even right while they are students, so that by the time they graduate, even before they graduate, they're already making impact in all their small communities in the school and outside the campus. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. And I think that's something that FIDA has been doing. We are collaborating with different universities to set up the FIDA Uganda University chapters, and we do have one already running in the 2 campuses of Mukono, in Makerere University, and the intention is to tap into some of the knowledge, some of the expertise, some of the human resource to reach out more in communities. But also it's important that we are building capacity, popular education, building consciousness when people are still in school, to be able to have more FIDA lawyers in the future, sort of doing this work. So in a minute, I will give each panelist a minute, ladies. We are out of time. To give your parting shot, I'll give Christine 2 minutes to be able to respond to the question that was asked in bullet, then we can be able to close.
Parting shot, I was still thinking about it. Parting shot, we are in this, so we should work together. Because when you talk about gender equality, it's not about women, it's also about men. It's about all of us. It might not impact on you as an individual, but the people we represent. So I implore us that if we can, let's do it within our means, within our spaces. Thank you.
For the question that received my friend, women are already committed in businesses. They need to be supported financially. They need financial support to do their businesses. Women need legal representation. I am happy and I want to appreciate FIDA. When you go to our office now in Lira, every day, I think we receive more than 20 clients, and more than 20 clients every day coming to support. So they need legal representation. Then legal aid clinics need to reach the women so that whoever does not know where to go or does not know what to do will access the legal aid support from wherever she is. Then she will find a way of getting where justice is. Women also need to be supported with the gender-based violence support system. That is clear. We have a GBV shelter. That GBV shelter is not funded in any way. There is a partner that supports us, and that shelter works better when you reach out to the community and they know the kind of services you are providing, and they come. Even the legal feeder is based at the shelter. We need to get out to reach the women, and they come to access the services. So the GBV support systems need to be strongly supported. When there's need for shelter, representation, reintegration, we need the financial support to the women and also to the organizations that are providing the support. Government does not have money now. Like, we don't reach out like we used to because there's no money. The bottom line is we need money to support women.
Thank you, Christine. Yes, Doreen, parting shots, any message?
Yes, thank you very much. Just to clarify on what she has said, government has money. But the only thing is that they are giving priority to other things and a lot of embezzlement therein, but it has money.
Doreen could close here and we close the whole gender forum.
Sorry. My parting shots. I want to really thank FIDA Uganda and the SIHA network for empowering us. Gone are the days when, women would hide their backs in the market, not really say a word. But right now we have the leadership committee, for example, in Nakawa market, where women can advocate, for example, getting the toilets in the market and all that. So I thank FIDA Uganda together with SIHA network, because creating the coalitions in different districts in Uganda is really a way forward to bringing about solidarity and also understanding the power dynamics that affect our lives as women. Thank you.
Thank you, Doreen. Yes, Santa.
Thank you so much. What I want to say is that I would like FIDA to, in a very, very special way, to extend their significant roles, which they are doing right now, deep in the villages where our women are. Because the trainings that we are actually, the trainings that has been conducted indeed has not yet reached deep in the village there. We need all our women really to access the trainings from FIDA. And two, I would also want to say that there is need for the revision in our laws, much as the laws are there, but we need to revise them and strengthen them, because there are also some implementers of these laws which are really not implementing our laws in the way they are supposed to implement. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen, for sitting through this difficult afternoon panel. After eating, it's usually difficult, but we are grateful the room is still full, and that you have participated in this panel. Thank you so much, ladies, for your information, but also for taking time and for the collaboration with the institution at large. Thank you so much, ladies and gentlemen. Let me hand back to our moderator, Sheila.
Okay, thank you, Liz. Please clap for Liz as well. Thank you for pulling us through. I promised 4 o'clock or thereabout, so thereabout. So thereabout. Okay, We're having our last, but definitely not our least panel, access to justice. So I would like in a very, very special way to invite our panelists, Miss Rachel Odoi Musoke. Rachel, you're welcome. Please come and take your seat. Please acknowledge Rachel, and please appreciate Rachel. In a very special way as well, I would like to invite Dr. Atim Patricia. You've been here since morning as well. Please acknowledge Dr. Patricia Atim. Here you are. Thank you so much. Please take your seats. Miss Elizabeth Atori. Elizabeth, are you here? Yes, Liz is here. Please acknowledge Liz as well with a clap. Okay. And of course, last but not least, Miss Susan Baluka. Susan, where are you? Susan, yes, there you go. Okay, I'll moderate this panel this evening. Are you all lawyers? Okay, looks like it. But nice, it's an all-women panel. Okay, access to justice. Our theme today is from commitment to investment, accelerating the achievement of SDG Goal 5. We are focusing more on access to justice. Rachel, I want to introduce Rachel. Rachel, you have Rachel in this book. But Rachel Odoi Musoke is the Senior Technical Advisor to the Governance and Security Program, formerly Justice, Law and Order Sector, JELOS, where she heads a multi-professional team of advisors working towards improving access to justice and rule of law through institutional development, innovations, and reforms. We know Rachel to be very passionate about human rights, women, children, and the environment. Rachel, if we've never thanked you, we want to say thank you. Please join me in thanking Rachel. Rachel is a household name within the sector because Rachel is very supportive of the sector, even within the JELOS. So Rachel, here we go. The topic was very clear, but we are standing between a very difficult time of traffic jam. Now people are looking at time to go home, but you know what to do. You've been in this thing. So Rachel, challenges in ensuring access to justice for women. What are those barriers? But also, in terms of accelerating the achievement, where should we really focus in terms of investment for access to justice? Thank you, Rachel.
Thank you very much, Sheila, and good afternoon to you all. I know it's very late in the afternoon, so I won't dwell in a lot of the preliminaries and those type of things, and maybe just go straight to the issues. In terms of access to justice and access to justice for women in particular, this is something that we always debate. We keep raising the issue, we keep talking about it, and sometimes we get the sense that we're just going round and round in circles, and we're not really addressing the issues. But the reality is that there has been progress. There has been some, but there are still a lot of areas that we need to deal with. There are a lot of issues. Women are still the majority. We are waiting for the final census results, but I still believe women are still the majority of the society. But they're not necessarily the majority where the influence lies. We've seen a growing number of women in those positions, but we still have a long way to go. And I think that was one of the starting points, making sure that women are sitting at the table and the places where decisions are being made. And that we are seeing a lot of that happening now. But when it comes specifically to the issue of justice, and from this perspective, I'll refer to JELOS just to make things easier, so that I don't have to explain. From the perspective of the JELOS, the Justice, Law and Order institutions, there are still some critical issues that we face in terms of service delivery, but that we also identify in our day-to-day work. Some of them are the traditional cultural barriers. We recognize that those still exist. Culture when it comes to our own indigenous communities, so the culture that we have inherited generations and what it means for women, but also culture in the sense of how do we live our lives today? What are those day-to-day things that we do in our own lives that influence how women access justice? So for example, in the household, who controls the resource? Who has access to money if you need to consult someone to buy land, if you want to write a will, who has the resource to go and do that? Oftentimes it's not with the women. So those are some of the cultural barriers we continue to see. Do women have the resource necessary for them to advance their rights? Because we've talked about women knowing their rights and women knowing the law, but can they actually make use of that law for their benefit? And we find that because of the resource and cultural issues in our own society, that's still one of the barriers that we face. So women have challenges if they want basic legal advice. Women are doing business, but how many of them can consult a lawyer about a contract? How many of them can pledge an asset for credit effectively and have their rights protected in such an arrangement? Most times they'd have to rely on a man to support them to do that. So those are some of the areas where the law exists. The law is apparently gender blind, but that doesn't help the woman. We need to have something very deliberate. So we still have cultural and those type of social barriers. We continue to have institutional barriers, and as JLOS we've tried, but there are areas where we still have a lot of institutional barriers. In terms of access, we are not everywhere. We've tried, we've covered over 75% of the districts with direct services, but it's not everywhere. And once you're not at the nearest point, then immediately the cost of justice has gone up. For somebody to access a police station, for somebody to access the Administrator General, for example, how far do they have to travel? So there are still some institutional barriers there. We're trying to break down those barriers. We are trying to bring the services as close as possible so that people do not have to travel far and do not incur costs in accessing those barriers. There are still legislative barriers. The law has been transformed quite a lot, but there's still a lot of areas in the law that leave gaps that can be exploited to the disadvantage. And I heard in the last panel some of those issues coming up. We have schemes that offer social support, but then what happens behind there? Well, how does that scheme actually work? So there are still areas where we have to fix some of those issues, whether it's by law or whether it is by how we enforce the laws that are in place. Issues of legal aid. Legal aid is still a big challenge, but also the social laws and how they apply to women. So there are still a lot of gaps that we have, but we're trying to deal with many of those issues through infrastructure development, through improving of service delivery, through opening up new options for how services can be delivered, but also through awareness creation. And awareness creation not just to know the law, but to be able to use it. It doesn't make any sense. You can know all the laws in the books. I think one of the things that frustrates me the most is we often talk about the woman in the village not knowing the law. But it is amazing how many women in the city working in corporate jobs do not know and cannot apply the law to improve their own lot. And I think that's where we need to put a lot of the focus on. Can we as women stand on our own feet and do what we can? When we're talking about women empowerment, let's talk about women empowerment in its own right, not in comparison to men or can we be equal to men, but can a woman stand on her own in her everyday life, provide for herself, protect her rights, defend her rights in her own right? And I think that's what we're working towards. I think lastly, I had in the last discussion the issue of money. Money is critical. And definitely resources are not as available as they have been in the past. But I think that should not hold us back. And they say you should cut your coat according to your cloth. I think the most important thing for us to do is whatever resource we have now, how do we prioritize it? What are our priorities? If we are struggling to find money to empower women, then we have not prioritized women. If it is a priority, you will find the money. Now, from the JLOS perspective, that's what we've done. We have prioritized certain things. We have prioritized gender justice. We have prioritized SGBV prevention. We have prioritized issues around transitional justice, issues around refugees, because there are a lot of women in the refugee community who struggle. And we've prioritized the general areas around case disposal that will address the areas that affect women the most. So family justice, SGBV cases, and some of the commercial cases. So the most important thing, I think, is whatever resource we have, however little it is, let us actively and consciously prioritize women. And then I think we can make some progress.
Wow, thank you, Rachel. Please acknowledge Rachel. Rachel, thank you. It's interesting that the priority areas for JLOS or the sector gender justice, SGBV prevention, transitional justice, case disposal, particularly also looking at SGBV survivors, accelerating the achievement of Sustainable Development Goal 5. Where do we put the investment? Thank you for the pointers in terms of the challenges and some of the areas that still we need to work on. Great. I'll now switch the gear very quickly to Patricia. Dr. Patricia, Rachel has ably articulated some of the challenges that they are confronted with, but also working towards alleviating or mitigating. Rachel, Patricia, if we look at the law, assessing the impact of recent legal reforms, judgments, judicial enforcement, and advancing women's rights in Uganda on a case-by-case basis, what's that one case or those two cases that will show you or that you can use to demonstrate that there's been progress? And maybe one other that will definitely show us that maybe these are areas we need to invest in.
Okay, thank
Dr.
you very
T.
much. Thank you very much, Sheila. Good afternoon, everybody. And thank you for really being here and for FIDA organizing this. There are actually a number of cases. You know, earlier in the day, Richard presented the statistics with the legislation progress with SGD. And you could see that in terms of legislation and policy, Uganda is scoring 80, 82. The scores were quite good from that presentation. And it's true that in the legislative arena and even the judicial decisions, we are moving quite progressively, although we still have some work to do. There are a number of cases. I don't even know which ones to pick. Let me just highlight quickly. Yes. In terms of protecting the girl child from early marriage and child pregnancies, etc., we have a recent decision, Aboneka and Kiria Martin, Aboneka Michael and Kiria Martin versus the Attorney General. That is a 2021 decision where the courts made it categorically clear that the marriageable age for all men, girls and boys is 18 years and above in conformity with our constitution. And that's very important for our communities where there is bedeviled with a lot of child marriage, etc. We can look at issues around prenuptial agreements. I was listening to a discussion of divorce, issues about divorce and so on. And the emphasis was we could reduce the backlog on divorce cases if parties could have prenuptial agreements and determine some of their property relations. And prenuptial agreements are not provided for in our marital laws. In terms of marriage laws, in Richard's presentation, we scored 82. Part of the 20% left is the lack of revised marital laws. So our current laws do not provide for prenups, but the courts have gone ahead in a decision, Margaret Hoff versus David Hoff, to recognize a prenuptial agreement and enforce them. In terms of the issue of bride gifts, Mifumi has told us we no longer call them bride price so that it's not commercialized. We call them bride gifts. And I note that from Mifumi, which was a much earlier decision, we now have Okello and Akello, which is a 2020 decision, where Justice Mubiru has recognized that bride gifts should no longer be a mandatory requirement for a customary marriage, but essential requirement. And why? That is important because when you study some of the cases, usually the preliminary objections raised are there was no marriage between the parties, there was partial payment of bride price, so she's not a wife. And then she's being denied access to property in case of succession issues because there was partial payment. But then Justice Mubiru in his, Land Justice Mubiru now, in his wisdom, moves away from the old position of partial payment of bride price equals an invalid customary marriage. But in Okello versus Akello recognizes that even that partial payment should still be recognized, a marriage as long as the parties then lived like husband and wife. There is also the question of non-registration of marriages. The Uganda Registration Services Bureau does a lot of marriage registration and etc. And this question usually affects customary marriages. When parties go to court and a woman is trying to enforce her right to land, to succession, and so on from the marriage sphere, she's usually faced with the PO. There was no marriage because there was a customary marriage which was not registered. But you see that the courts have maintained, even if the legislation provides that registration should take place and non-registration is an offense. But when you deal with validity of marriage, then the courts, even in most recently in Jumba Ronald and Justin Muyanja versus Teopista, Semuyinge, where a lady was being disenfranchised of her on a right to get, letters of administration in the estate. The court continues to hold that non-registration of a customary marriage does not invalidate a marriage. We move to the arena of cohabitation. We recognize, I think it is clear that about 64%, we wait for the census, this recent census that has taken place, to tell us how many Ugandans are living in cohabitation. But we know that there are Ugandans living in cohabitation, and FIDA has moved for the recognition of their property rights, at least some law around there, so that they are not disenfranchised. We don't have law currently, legislative development around cohabiting couples, but we have progressive judicial cases or jurisprudence. We are moving from Musa Chigongo and Olivia Chigongo to Baramureba Stephen and Kichoncho Pamela, where the courts recognize proprietary estoppel and constructive marriage to protect the interest of the cohabiting women in the property that they had worked so hard to obtain. We now can celebrate also Fidman Bagala versus Lona, where Justice Musa Sekana actually calls on cohabiting parties to enter into cohabitation agreements. And cohabitation agreements are also frameworks used in South Africa. There is a FIDA report to that effect, which is detailed. I know that FIDA will share it with you at some point. And then this means if our parties in cohabitation can enter into cohabitation agreements, and courts can recognize and enforce such agreements if they are void of fraud, misrepresentation, duress, etc., then there will be some level of protection for women or women in cohabitation, hence contributing towards SGD 5. If you look at the areas of succession law, we celebrate the recent adoption of the Succession Act 2022 that has provided many progressive provisions, really. One which includes the recognition of all children, both male and female, as beneficiaries in the estate, recognized both male and female children who can be heiresses to the estates of their parents, and the cases are there. For instance, there is Namubiru Betty and Namutebi Winnie versus Saulo Birungi and others. It's a 2019 case where the Succession Act 2022 was applied to recognize the rights of these the daughters to the estate of their father, and the fact that one of them could actually be a heiress. I would also maybe comment on the issue of legitimate and illegitimate children. We are moving from a position where there is this divide. Sometimes they even call them bastards. That kind of language is still there. There are decisions like Diomuhangi Asimwe and Immaculate Asimwe, Namubiru Betty and another versus Saulo Birungi, where the courts, Mubiru is a 2019 case, but the courts have reiterated the position that in Uganda, there is no distinction between legitimate and illegitimate children. All children are children with equal rights, and all they need to prove is that they are children of the party in question. And once that is proved, then they have the right to inherit from the estate. I'll then move on to the issue of residential holding, because also this affects many women in our society. The question, after the death of a husband, then a woman is thrown out of what was the matrimonial home. The courts have also, the Succession Act 1 has kind of prohibited any disenfranchisement of parties, a surviving spouse from a matrimonial home. A surviving spouse, woman or man, remains in the matrimonial home until their death or until their remarriage. And if any of those two events occur, then the interest in the matrimonial home reverts to the lineal descendants, who are the children of the deceased persons. So you see that there is some level of recognition of the matrimonial property rights of a spouse in that property, and also the right of a spouse to continue staying in that property. That holding was first emanated in the case of Cholia versus Cholia in the High Court. That was a 2016 decision, but you also see it again re-emphasized in Jane Chorayende versus Efuransi Chomukundi and others, a decision in Barara, where the courts position that a spouse who is married, a surviving spouse, remains in the matrimonial home until they remarry or until they die. We also have this other biting issue of separated spouses. When you're a husband or a spouse, the language of the law, is if a spouse dies and a spouse dies and then there's another spouse who was not living with that spouse at the time of the spouse's death, does that spouse then lose an interest in the estate, as it were in the old law? The Succession Amendment Act has changed that position and said you do not lose an interest. There are a number of exceptional circumstances, and the courts have also recognized that the fact that a surviving spouse was not living with the deceased at the time of the deceased death does not deprive that spouse of the shares in the estate, because we must take into recognition the efforts of that spouse in acquiring those properties prior to their departure. The circumstances for their departure must be put into consideration. And in these two cases that I cite here, Patricia Were and 3 others versus Were Immaculate, stepchildren versus their mother, their case, and then there are cases where the women, in one case, like Were Immaculate had to leave the home because of the infidelity of her husband. She could no longer stay in the home. So she distanced herself, but the marriage was never dissolved. In the case of Mumbere and 3 others versus Masiko Joy, the wife also, Masiko Joy, had to leave, was chased away by the relatives when her husband was sick, and then he subsequently died. Then the relatives brought an action that she's not entitled to an interest in what was the matrimonial home, and now is part of the estate of the deceased husband, and court held in their favor in both cases. And for we who are women who have lived through these instances of divorce, misunderstanding in homes, in-laws chasing you away, etc., such changes are really celebrated changes in law and in judicial decisions. Then the Succession Act also recognizes the right that a mother can now grant testamentary guardianship to her children, and that is also a very important aspect of the law. I'll leave succession there in the interest. Hey, I don't want to forget burial grounds. Let us celebrate the decision of the Land Justice Sarah Chamoko, Annette Yosa and others versus Ambassador Idule Amoko, and then Chobe Lusereka and others versus Aida Namalwa. These decisions, read in totality or in detail, empower women to decide burial grounds for themselves, whether you're married or not married, and even burial grounds for their spouses. Because in Lusereka's case, for instance, the wife, the in-laws were fighting the wife in determining the burial ground of the husband. And the court said a spouse can determine the burial ground of another spouse, which was not the case. And then there are the Annette Yosa decision, that one we experienced it, the burial of her Lady Justice Sarah Chamoko, what it was like. And for us, that decision breathed life in Sustainable Development Goal 5. Because we are seeing transition or transformation of custom. This idea that you once married, you must be buried in the other family. If you don't want it, a woman can express and decide where they'll be buried. Now that is about it with succession issues. Then in the divorce arena, the FIDA Uganda decision, which 2005, that challenged the offending provisions of the Divorce Act, has finally yielded fruit, because we finally, last year, under the Law Revision Miscellaneous Amendment Act of number 17 of 2023, there were reforms in the Divorce Act that provides that the grounds for divorce are now open to both women and men. You know, that was following the decision in the FIDA case, and that is a plus for FIDA and the 50 years of FIDA's existence and the struggles. Of course, challenges remain in the divorce arena. The questions of matrimonial property, they are still controversial. We moved from Julius Rabinumi to Aiku to Ambayo Joseph, and now most recently we have Yuhire Peace versus Paul Kagwa, where the lady was given curtains and a cow. So you see that there is still the need to pass matrimonial law in order to, property law, in order to regulate matrimonial property issues among spouses. But it's still a gain for FIDA and all women activists to have the issue of matrimonial property being discussed and at least some level of recognition for women. So I'll leave that there. I want to talk about persons with disabilities. One, we must thank FIDA today, a round of applause for disability inclusion. You can see we have our sign language interpreters and persons with the impairment being included in the conversation. There is very progressive legislation in the area of disability, We have the Persons with Disabilities Act 2020, the Mental Health Act 2019, all passed by our legislators, which are very progressive in provision and try to harmonize with the UNCRPD, the United Convention on the Rights of Persons with Disabilities, which was ratified by Uganda in 2008. And we celebrate Ministry of Gender or the government because in November 2023, Uganda ratified the protocol to the African Charter on Human and People's Rights on the Rights of Persons with Disabilities. All these are good efforts towards empowering our persons with disabilities that also include women. And there are enough cases in our courtrooms that have also been progressive. We have Sehad Yiga, Sehad Perez, and many others. I will share maybe there is Chandia Emmanuel. Earlier in the morning session, somebody talked about access. The state of Uganda is being found liable by our own courts for failing to provide accessible public spaces, the courts and so on, for persons with disabilities. But the good news also is that the courts and the Ministry of Gender and other active disability activists are in conversation to enact what we are calling the judicature rules for persons with disabilities to enhance access to justice for persons with disabilities in courts in terms of creating reasonable accommodation measures for all persons with disabilities in the courtrooms. The issues around the domestic violence were discussed earlier, but the Domestic Violence Act is there. And then in the health area, you know, even the recent budget 2023 that was just read. Yes, I'm actually winding up. The finance minister said he boasted that he has allocated a lot more money to the health sector so that women and their children can have safe births and so on, if you read the budget statement. So let us hope that the money will be prioritized and not siphoned away like we are seeing, so that we really have meaningful improvement in the health sector and protection of women's rights. But there is the National Development Plan 3, now they are drawing 4, which focuses on health center. There are also cases like Sehad versus the Nakaseke Hospital, etc., where the maternal health rights for women were really upheld. So in a nutshell, you can see that yes, we have to pass laws like the Marriage Bill 2022 must be passed, so that we revisit the laws in the marriage area and update them, etc. But there is meaningful progress in areas of legislation and judicial transformation, in judicial decisions, in trying to realize the SGD 5. Thank you very much.
Wow, Dr. Patricia, a big one for Patricia. Dr. Patricia is a lecturer at the School of Law, Makerere University, but she's currently also heading the clinical legal education in the public interest law clinic, PILAC, at the School of Law. And they do similar work that you do at the students' outreaches, going to markets, going to communities to teach, but also to provide legal aid as well. Thank you, Patricia. Lots of rich jurisprudence, many things we don't know. Around that one on cohabitation, I like it because some of us are we are cohabiting. So those things are really important. The matrimonial home issue is very important. Property, burial grounds. I had women clapping, burial grounds. You don't want to be buried the other side. You choose. But the clapping meant, now I can go the other side. Okay, but Patricia, and of course the question would go to you, but we can discuss that later. How do we disseminate these findings these rulings in the most simplest form? And like Rachel said, it's amazing how sometimes we have this stereotype that rural women don't know, but we don't know. Even urban, we don't know. You listen to all those rulings and the things that touch us the most. We don't know. We read and laugh, and the TikTok comes but there are things that are touching us about our children, about burial grounds, about matrimonial home, separation, when you separate, and then what happens when your spouse dies, do you have rights? Many of us will be the the women will stand up and say, but you went, why are you coming back? Very ignorant about, the jurisprudence. So thank you very much, Dr. Patricia.
Want me to answer that now?
Yes, 1 minute.
Okay, I think that is very, very material because in my identity, the gaps is awareness and sensitization. And I think the duty now is, the ball is in our court as feeder to break these these rulings and laws in very user-friendly material. And then beautifully enough, we have these women associations I have had here, Gulu Women's Coalition, Lira Women's Coalition, I'm not waiting any longer. Is that the title?
We cannot wait.
These groups can then help us break that
We are
kind
not
of
waiting any longer.
policy brief or loose leaf into the language of the community. And then we train them, or we sensitize them as the women's groups in the grassroots, and then they train the others now in the language that is user-friendly for the public or for their respective communities. I think it will be one of the strategies. And then the radio talk shows and so on and so forth can be there. And using the students also from Gulu University, where the universities are spread across. With these clinical programs are also helpful, but what they said earlier, funding is important to support all these initiatives, to take this information in the community so that we receive the attitude and mind change, the one which is being mindset change, which is being budgeted there in the government, in parliament. If the money does not disappear, we plan. Those could be some of the initiatives.
Thank you very much, Patricia. Again, thank you for sharing that knowledge. I'll switch the mic now to Elizabeth. Elizabeth Hattori is Program Manager, Access to Justice, Digital ID, and Business and Human Rights at ISA, Initiative for Social and Economic Rights. If you look at our small booklet, Elizabeth is a seasoned legal professional with over 8 years of experience, dedicated to championing human rights and equality. Elizabeth, we've heard from Patricia. How do we strengthen these gains? And how do we strengthen also the legal frameworks to safeguard and promote women's rights? Elizabeth Hattori.
Thank you very much. And Patricia was already what we would call stealing the exam because she was my lecturer at the university. But she did talk about the fact that oftentimes many people believe that as the women's movement, we have taken large strides in terms of women understanding their rights. But what you say is right. The fact that we are seeing more and more cases, if we look at the police report, the number of gender-based violence cases that are currently happening, and even the fact that women are not going forth for these particular instances of violations shows that we still have more to be done. And it's true what they say, that as a country, we have laws that speak to these particular protections. But it's also true that certain parts of the law have been silent on particular issues that are pertinent to women. And Dr. Patricia does highlight most of those gaps. Gaps particularly around property rights, gaps on dissolution of property for cohabitants, relationships. But there are also those particular laws that have intentionally, given the interest that we've seen in the public and also the patriarchal norms and values, gone silent around particular issues that concern women. I'll give you a very good example. I work with, so a lot of the focus is on health education. And we have guidelines that talk about the prevention and management of pregnancy in school settings. Within those guidelines, girls can only go to school up to 3 months and then go back home and then come back 6 months later. Those guidelines were passed at the peak of COVID-19, right when we were coming out. And there was rallying around the public that was speaking to a solution by government, and that was the solution that we were presented with. But what those guidelines don't tell you is that the girls will, in essence, be out of school for 12 months. That's a full entire year. If you count the 6 months during pregnancy and then 6 months thereafter, we are out of school for 12 months. So there are instances where we have the laws that speak to certain protections, but those exact laws, in essence, are also perpetuating violations. So in this case, for the management of pregnancy for girls in schools, we are in fact telling them go back home. And perhaps when you are ready, 6 months down the road, come back. But how often do we see those girls coming back? So we need to conduct a gender-sensitive analysis of not only the laws, but also the policies. beyond enacting the laws, how are we able to enforce these particular laws? Particularly in the Justice Center, as women, most times or often when there has been sexual gender-based violence, the first point of contact that a woman goes to is either the LC or the traditional leader that is closest to her, and sometimes perhaps family. But have we brought those particular actors to play in terms of ensuring that their capacity is built on gender-sensitive issues and gender justice? And beyond that, how are we tracking these cases? As a country, we have done a good job of tracking the cases that are recorded by the police. But what about those that are reported at the community level? Are we leaving those particular cases out? How are we ensuring that even those women that stop at the local council level are able to get the justice that they need? That those cases are being followed up, that those women are being followed up. And because this particular issue is not just a legal construct, it's also a social construct. So that means we need to be able to put in place structures at the community level that are also able to deal with these issues. So that we go away from the rhetoric of we have so many good laws, but in terms of enforcement, we are unable to enforce our laws. So one thing that we can do particularly is to be able to build the community structures to support such instances. One key thing that we can do, for example, is around the question of shelters for women or survivors of gender-based violence. These particular efforts have been left to development partners and civil society organizations to compound. How can we put government to task to be able to come on board, to be able to strengthen the particular gender-based violence shelters that have also suffered as a result of COVID-19? And one thing that I also would want us to start to think about is, if we are talking about strengthening enforcement, how are we monitoring? There's a real challenge in this country around data and data collection. If we are talking about being able to hit SDG 5, how are we being able to use gender disaggregated data in our justice systems? The data that is coming out from police, the data that is coming out from the courts of law, to be able to inform policies that we then use to strengthen systems, particularly for women and girls. And I believe if we are also going to be able to speak about legal aid and thank FIDA for the legal aid services that they are giving women, are we able to push for our Legal Aid Act? Ms. Rachel, where's our Legal Aid Act currently? And what can we do? For a number of years, we sang the song of the Legal Aid Bill. And right now, that conversation has died down. And yet, the people that need that legal aid the most are women. And whilst we have put in place interventions, for example, FIDA's Legal Aid Clinic, these interventions are few and set apart. That means we are not reaching as many women as we're reaching. So how can we be able to reignite these conversations around the bills that have been silent, the marriage and divorce bill, and be able to improve the laws? And whilst we've had very rich jurisprudence around property rights and cohabitation contracts, can we put this into the law? Can we create an act? Can we reform our acts so that our acts are speaking to the developments on the jurisprudence that we are seeing? Because as we well know, a woman might not know that there was this case that was decided, but she will know that there was a law that was passed by Parliament. She will also be given an opportunity to go to Parliament and address her before Parliament. That's very well speaks to issues around participation of women throughout the democracy process and being able to push for rule of law. So I believe if we are to be able to strengthen the legal framework, we need to look at the current legal framework. We need to analyze it, identify the gaps that we see in the current legal framework. And Dr. Patricia has done a very good job of highlighting the developments, but also highlighting the gaps. And then from there, understanding how then do we make men aware and how do we strengthen these particular frameworks. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Elizabeth. Please, let's appreciate Elizabeth. I think your emphasis has also been on that gender-sensitive analysis of laws, the post-legislative scrutiny. I think that was a message also in the last panel. You know, we have the good laws, yes, but moving from the good laws, what's happening in terms of operationalizing and achieving goal 5. So looking after you've passed the law, what does that mean for gender equality? Thank you very much, Elizabeth. Thank you for sharing very freely some of the areas we can reinvest to accelerate goal number 5. Last but not least, Susan. Susan Baluka is Manager, Strategic Litigation, FIDA Uganda. Good thing you're the host. And you know the time. So, Susan, I want to introduce you properly, nicely. Susan Baluka, her profile is in this little nice book, is the Strategic Litigation Manager at FIDA Uganda. She has 8 years as well worth of experience in litigating cases on the rights of marginalized communities in Uganda, including women's economic justice, violence against women, and sexual reproductive health and rights. Susan, this issue of enforcement, I think Liz spoke a little bit about it, the issue of enforcement. What are some of those best practices that you're seeing, global but also national level, in terms of advancing gender justice, the gender justice agenda? Susan.
Thank you very much, Sheila. Like you rightly said, I can see the time. And I'm going to be as succinct as possible, not just because I am part of the FIDA Secretariat and we are the hosts, but because as a feminist, I understand that we are almost getting into time for care work. So I shall keep it brief so that we can all go to start performing our care duties. So in terms of global best practices when it comes to enforcing women's human rights as part of the tool for advancing the global gender justice agenda, I will just make reference to information that has been put out by the UN, specifically various UN agencies, including the UN Women, the UNDP, and the UN Office of the High Commissioner for Human Rights. And what I like about this information that they did share is that contrary to what one may think, that it is simply information that was disseminated based on what they thought up, it was actually based on a multi-country study, multi-country study that they did on the different access to justice mechanisms within different countries, including Uganda, actually. So basically, they guide that in advancing access to justice for women and basically ensuring that they are effective, accountable, and gender-responsive justice institutions, it is first of all very important that the synergies between the formal justice institutions, those are institutions like courts of judicature, the police, which are established through acts of parliament or statute law, have a very good co-working relationship with other informal justice systems. For example, the clan systems and also other cultural systems within our communities. And in that regard, they also do highlight and provide guidance on key 6 dimensions for ensuring that those structures are actually comprehensive in terms of access to justice for women. And they basically highlight that number 1, the justice systems should be justiciable. The number 1 dimension is justiciability. And of course, they said that by and large, this covers all the key elements through which a justice system should be analyzed. But I think one of the key aspects in terms of justiciability is that most of the issues that affect women surely should be able to a woman should be able to access a remedy for them. So Dr. Patricia has been talking about how our legal system at the moment makes it difficult for women in cohabitation relationships to access justice because the law as is does not limit the extent to which issues pertaining to women in cohabitation relationships can be adjudicated upon by the courts, although there have been various ways around that, as she has rightly highlighted in the jurisprudence that she has shared with us. And then the other pillar or dimension that should be considered for the effectiveness of a justice system is availability and accessibility. Accessibility is also a separate pillar, but I'll speak to it concurrently with availability. So this, I think, is quite apparent in terms of how many courts are in the different regions within the country. Where are they situated? How accessible are they to the woman at the grassroots? And in that regard, we are encouraged as states in ensuring that our justice systems and mechanisms of enforcing women's rights are available and accessible to them. We are encouraged to, first of all, advocate or ensure that there is holistic infrastructure development. So if you're talking about, I think it was Mercy Munduru who talked about the road infrastructure. We know that that can be a hindrance, not just for the litigants who are seeking access to justice through whether formal or informal systems, but also for those of us who assist the legal aid service providers. How easy is it for you to get to a court so that you can represent your client? So the aspect about holistic infrastructure development is important. So here we are looking at roads, we are looking at the court buildings, police stations that are built in different areas, especially the remote and hard-to-reach areas. And then also, we are encouraged to be as innovative as possible. And in this regard, they highlight innovations such as special courts, which I think we do have, mobile courts, which I have seen them being implemented, especially for the criminal cases. It is not something I have really seen for civil cases, and yet there is also a lot of backlog there within the context of Uganda, so we might have to consider scaling up on that. Then having self-help desks in different areas, especially in remote areas, or even areas like refugee settlements. And then also having cost-free hotlines or helplines. I think a number of us who are legal aid service providers do provide those, especially through our toll-free lines. And then in terms of innovations as well, they talk about scaling up on ICT. ICT not just in the sense of data collection across different justice institutions, but also I think it is also important in terms of accessibility to the court itself. I'll give one very good example, and this is from my own experiences in Kenya. Post-COVID, Kenya really embraced ICT and having court sessions online. I did personally attend an entire court session before the Supreme Court. There was no glitch in the network system, and each of the parties in the case was actually able to effectively go through the court session in their own place of convenience. So, and I'm thinking, when I look back here at home in Uganda, that is not something that we have really embraced as much. Most times, the online court sessions that you see are usually in instances where they have not been able to bring prisoners from the prison, and so they just attend the court session virtually. But in terms of ICT and why it's important for access to justice for women, for those of us who have been in this work of doing legal aid service provision, we know how long you will stay at the court premises, just waiting for your case to be heard. So you spend the whole day there, the whole day is wasted. And here we are looking at time poverty. Time poverty is one of the things that women really suffer. So if a woman has to have her case determined that day, it means she will leave her market stall. She will not have any sales for that day because she has been at court waiting for her case file to be called. So in terms of embracing ICT, I think it's very important for us to also consider that, especially in terms of addressing the issue of time poverty for women. And then also the other best practice that I've also seen again in Kenya, and I think which our counterparts, FIDA Kenya, did actually share with us, is the aspect of self-representation, where you don't really need to have a lawyer. It's basically a program where you don't have a lawyer, but you're able to represent yourself before the judicial officer. But I think one of the key things, and even the team from FIDA Kenya did share, is that one of the key things for that kind of innovation to really be scaled up on is also to actively engage the judiciary. So if I am representing myself as a woman from deep down in the village, are the same court procedures and rules of, court decorum and all that are they going to apply to me? And already we've seen that there is also a challenge in terms of accessibility due to language barrier, due to technicalities. So I think self-representation is an innovation that really needs to be scaled up. The other key issue in terms of accessibility is other related costs that come with a woman having to go to court to access a justice institution or forum. So things like transportation, usually poor road infrastructure comes with poor road infrastructure, but also limited physical access to justice institutions comes with a high transportation costs. For instance, there are instances where they do offer minimal, sums of money to help women alleviate some of those costs. Of course, there are systems in place to ensure that you are deserving of that small amount of money to relieve you from the cost that comes with you having to travel from wherever you've come from. But that is also one practice that has been recommended for consideration. And then also, there are also other accessibility aspects, especially in relation to access to justice for women with disabilities. Does the court infrastructure have ramps, for instance? Are there sign language interpreters in the courts? I know that ISA has done a case around that. And I think there is an appeal from the decision of the Constitutional Court, and we hope that there will be some good jurisprudence that will come out of that. And of course, one of the other things also in terms of the pillars is that the justice system should be of good quality. This really speaks to aspects of gender sensitivities of the different justice actors, including the communal justice actors. And in that regard, it is highly recommended that we invest very, very heavily in mindset change and basically gender sensitivity and transformational approaches for the different justice actors at different levels. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Susan. A round of applause for Susan. Susan, thank you for the checklist on what that means in terms of best practices. I have a question or inquiry here for Rachel. Rachel, somebody's asking, and I think in relation to Liz, the legal aid bill, and says legal aid service provision is very expensive and not at all sustainable for NGOs to undertake or to carry out. Is there hope that the legal aid bill will be passed? Rachel. You're not a parliamentarian, that's okay.
I think we should always have I can't speak for when it will be passed. I can't speak for that, but definitely there is a critical need for legal aid, and the expectation was never that it would be provided by non-state actors. It really was that it would be provided by government. But as the person who asked the question mentions, legal aid is expensive even for government, and not just for government here. Legal aid is expensive everywhere. I think the government of the UK has been recently reconsidering its legal aid system because of the cost. Similarly in Australia, it is a very, very expensive venture. But if we're going to have real access to justice, if we're going to have real rights, then legal aid is critical. What we've been through, even as the legal aid bill is moving through its tracks, we're also looking at what in the event that this bill doesn't pass in the form it's in, what are the options? What can we do? at the very basic, there are certain things that we need to have in place. We need to have some kind of a public defender system. So even if the legal aid system just concentrated on a public defender system, that would be one step. We need to support paralegals. There are places we just can't send Dr. Patricia and other people like that. But we can use paralegals. So how are we working to make sure that we have enough of this personnel available? And I think the universities, the law schools can help us. How can we have these paralegals trained and deployed? They can support us, for example, at police stations where someone needs advice. They can support us in the prisons where people need that basic advice on procedure. How do I apply for bail? When is my committal? What do I do with my committal? Things like that. You don't need a full lawyer to do that. A paralegal can actually do that work. So we can look at the options of paralegals. And then we need to look at cost-effective measures for us to be able to spread the service as far as possible. So we're looking at that from the perspective of government. But what I would think in the current situation is for us to coordinate ourselves as legal aid service providers, both state and non-state. Let's work together. There are some parts of the country that are overserved. There are parts of the country that have no service. Can we reconfigure our service so that we cover the country? I think in the meantime, those are some of the things I would suggest that we look at in terms of legal aid, while we continue the advocacy to have a fully fledged legal aid bill.
Excellent. Thank you very much, Rachel. The issue of reconfiguring and rethinking the mapping, that's important. The paralegals, and of course the students. How do we continue to invest in the students as one of the accelerators for SDG goal number 5? Thank you so much. Thank you to our panel. Is there a burning comment? Yes, I see you, but I want to also look over the other side. This side. There's nothing burning. One little burning one. Okay, let me start with about 1 little minute. It's a comment? Do one. Comment or question? No. Comment, question. It's 5 o'clock. Comment. Question.
Yeah, thank you so much. I would wish to, in a very special manner, to actually assert this question to Dr. Patricia about the registration of marriage, and which is said, which is talked about. But the most burning issue is the cohabitation agreement, which is to be recognized before the court of law vis-a-vis the MAD bill. I would want to know which one, because I understand the MAD bill, that is marriage and divorce bill, has been pending, compared to this cohabitation agreement. Which one do you think will really help women? Because all these two, they may be good, but there must be one which needs to help women very fast. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. Thank you for respecting that time. Patricia, and the conversation around prenuptial maybe. Okay, one last one from Enid. Question, comment. Q or C? Enid, question.
Thank you very much. I thank the panel, and I would like to address Rachel. Rachel, you made a comment about corporate women, and I was looking at what we are saying: enhanced access to justice for poor, vulnerable women, children, marginalized communities. It is something we've always struggled with. How do you bring the corporate woman on board? Can we have a paying arm? All those questions. I wanted you to say a little more about that.
Thank you so much. Over to you, the panelists. Question was to Patricia and to Rachel. There's a mic there. There should be one. Okay.
Thank you so much, Mama Santa, is it? Okay. Between the cohabitation agreement and the marriage bill, which one would I choose? Which one is more important than the other? I will not choose any. They are both important. Because if I'm to ask in this house, if we had the time and we said how many people are married legally and protected by the law, most likely the hands will be fewer than those who are actually cohabiting and they have children and they have property that they've acquired in the course of their relationship. And our laws from the Constitution, etc., provides for the protection of all persons, So whether a woman is in a legitimate marriage a legal marriage relationship or is cohabiting, their rights have to be protected by the state. So we need the marriage bill to pass to cover those who are legally married and so on. We also need what is being called the cohabitation property bill to regulate property issues around parties in cohabitation. Imagine just one example, our newly enacted Succession Act, Amendment Act 2022. It provides for division of property among spouses. Spouses-in-law are married people. So those of us who are not legally married in accordance with the laws of Uganda, but you're living together, you have children, you have property, in the event that you die now, the law has no cover for you. So what is going to happen? Will those in-laws just come and grab things, or will the surviving spouse just take everything? How about the children of the marriage, those you came with to this marriage, those kinds of things? So we have no law. So are those couples important too? Santa, are those couples important in your community? That's why I cannot choose. Both the married and the cohabiting parties must be provided for and protected under our laws.
Thank
you very much.
Thank you very much, Dr. Patricia. One to Rachel.
The corporate women. I think our priority when it comes to a lot of these other things is the poor, because of there is a pressing need. There is an urgent need there. But when we're talking about the SDGs, and we keep saying leave no one behind, in this effort to prioritize, there is that category we're leaving behind. But I think we have to first understand why they're being left behind, because it might be a completely different issue. It might have nothing to do with, I think to some extent there's an issue of stigma. There's an issue of fear of opening up of your problems. So maybe we need to have a completely different approach to deal with those women. But it's important that we don't leave them behind. The cases that Dr. Patricia I was peeping, and I wonder how many of them were women in the village. I think a lot of them were not. And there are many cases like that. So maybe we need to look at some kind of a strategy that provides a safe space for us to deal with that issue. It could be a paying space, because I think many of them would willingly contribute to a space where they can discuss and express those issues. But we shouldn't leave them behind. To me, that's the most important thing. But just give back the microphone. A few things that were mentioned from the other panelists that I wanted to clarify, to give some information. One, on the issues of local council courts and traditional leaders. We recognize the problems that are around that area. We've been working with the Law Reform Commission to provide guidelines and training for both categories. With local government, we worked with the local council courts. We have specific training dealing specifically with some of the gender issues. To clarify things for them, but then to make sure that they also keep records, are able to comply with the law and things like that. We're doing the same now for traditional leaders. We don't want to interfere with the culture, but we want to make sure that there are safeguards. So we're looking at guidelines that will provide some of those safeguards for them. The other one was about data for management. That's something that we have also advertised. Across the different institutions, we're emphasizing data collection, disaggregation of that data, but analysis and application of that data in decision making. There are some institutions like, for example, Police CID, who are emphasizing that. So where they've been just producing the crime report and presenting figures, they're now taking the time to actually analyze, process, and make decisions and plans based on that information. I think the other one is around shelters. We have been working on this particular area. What we are trying to do is to have one-stop centers. This is a one-stop center where if somebody comes and reports to police, the place where they report will provide all the ancillary services that they may need. So if they need somewhere to stay, somewhere safe, there will be accommodation and somewhere where they can be kept safe. If they need counseling services, there'll be counseling services. If they need medical services, we're working together with Ministry of Health to make sure they have medical services. So this is a one-stop center. It's in line with the Kampala Declaration, and it's something that we're working on. Currently, we have 2 sites still within the central where we're trying to develop and implement the concept. One is partially operational, the other one will be soon. And then we hope after that we'll be able to roll it out. So I just thought it was something that, for the legislation, I can only say that we need to continue to work together. I just wanted to say, I'm so uncomfortable when we refer to the marriage and divorce bill as the MAD bill. I don't want us to own that.
The MAD bill.
The MAD bill, because it was used in a way to bring down that. I think we as women should give it some better status. We should impress upon people the seriousness of the legislation, and make sure that we work together. The biggest I worked on that bill in its initial stages, and I did the advocacy. One of the most painful things was that the attacks that we got were from women. I had a woman who told me, I was a bit younger then, and we were in an advocacy session, and she turned to me and she said, "Young girl, one day you're going to be married and you will see." And I was shocked because it was a woman, and the men were supporting us. So as women, we need to stand and defend this legislation because it's essential. It is the foundation of so much more. It is essential.
Great. Thank you very much. A round of applause to the panelists. Thank you so much, panelists. Please stand up, take a picture of our panel. I think we forgot to take pictures of the others. So for this one, you're lucky. Again, let's appreciate our panelists. Thank you, Liz, Rachel, Dr. Patricia, and of course, Susan. Where do we look? Where is the camera? It's there. Okay. Fine. Thank you very much. Thank you so much. Again, thank you very much, my dears. You can take your seats here. Again, thank you so much, audience. Thank you for the comments. Those who sent their comments online, thank you very, very much. Liz, are you ready? In 5 real minutes. We have been here the whole day. From commitment to investment, accelerating the achievement of Sustainable Development Goal 5. What has come of the National Gender Forum, Liz 2024? And where are we taking this from here?
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. I'll quickly go over some of the issues that have come out very strongly that the institution is going to look at in terms of way forward from today's important conversations. So I'll begin with the start one. Money is the first point, that we need to look for the money to do the work. We need to mobilize money within ourselves to do this work. What has also come out, and as a result of the work that we've done and the good things that we see out of this, is to continue mentorship of young women to occupy these different spaces. This came out from the panel on community perspectives, but also the other speakers that spoke about the kind of the journey that we have walked through the mentorship programs. There is one also on development of clear gender strategies to promote gender equality through the CSO space. And here in brackets we have put the Women's Manifesto to clearly state what are we doing as women's rights institution in this country, what are we demanding from government, what are we negotiating for, how are we crafting our programs towards some of those things that will help us achieve on gender equality. There's something also on involving women in policy dialogue and women and peace and security. I know this has been important work that FIDA was doing in northern Uganda with the formerly abducted women and children born through either rape or during the war, but it's something that came out as one that we need to invest more money in. The other was on unpaid care work, which I'd like to recognize that our partner, Uonet and Oxfam, also a friend of FIDA, have been leading conversations around unpaid work, but also it's something that we have a lot of interest in, so we'll be able to make those linkages as we go forward. There is need for strengthening monitoring and evaluation and accountability mechanisms on implementation of laws. So it's extremely important that if a law is passed, that we are able, as a legal aid service provider, make quick assessments on how the law is being implemented. And this was, I think, something that came from the fact that while we have many laws, implementation continues to be a huge challenge. Judicial activism and legislative advocacy around promoting gender equality, that's top of the agenda for the Leadership Academy, one of our initiatives. So I'm pretty sure through the different trainings and engagements with judicial officers, this is something that we'll continue advocating for. Issue of data. Data comes about 3 times in these notes. Collaboration with UBOS, National Planning Authority, gender disaggregated data continues to be important, especially for the advocacy work that we are doing. There is a call for investment on GBV response, especially in rural and far-to-reach areas, that while we are in about 20 districts, that's still not enough, but also it's just one institution. So how would we continue to broaden the players along the way of the GBV referral mechanism? There is something else on increasing engagement with informal justice actors to continue bridging that gap that exists, that sort of sometimes is a challenge for those that are trying to access justice through those. The other is post-gender equality judgment strategies. And I think this will be also something that we will do through the Leadership Academy, just analyzing what do these judgments in court mean for the woman in Lira, but also to see how are these judgments getting implemented. Because you will hear about some public interest litigation cases that have happened before, but implementation of the same is not happening. So how do we ensure that after so many years in court, we are able to see the results of these judgments that the judiciary is also investing heavily in. The issue of shelters still has come out very strongly, investment in shelters, igniting advocacy around shelters. I think a lot of CSOs really lost a lot of hope over those years of continuing to speak about shelters, but it has come out as something that we need to invest more in. A victim-centered approach of handling SGBV cases. I think this is something that we are already doing, but investment in this also is one of the pointers from today's dialogue. Media engagements, meaningful media engagements is what it's noted here. How do we leverage on the media to be able to also follow our journey or our agenda on gender equality? One of the things that Rachel spoke about was the name that we use for the marriage bill. And I don't know if you remember the Anti-Pornography Act bill, I think it became the miniskirt bill and they were undressing women downtown almost immediately. So it's important that we are doing or investing more in what the media reports, what the media prioritizes, how the media represents women, especially in some of the sensitive places like those in leadership, especially elective politics. Linking of women from the grassroots to information centers, that's still something that FIDA does, but I think there is need for more investment in that regard so that more women are getting more information. And I think from what Christine from the panel on the community perspective did say earlier, that it's important you're engaging continuously and deliberately. There are always lives that are changing in that regard. Evidence-based advocacy, research. As an institution, we are continuing to build ourselves as a center of excellence, and we recognize that information, knowledge documents, research in the different areas that we've spoken about today are on top of the agenda for the Leadership Academy and the Secretariat at large. I think the last one was on paralegals and other community engagement groups on how they can assist better on the journey of access to justice. I think Rachel has spoken about it, how better can our paralegals, community legal volunteers, women's activists, depending on the level of seeking for justice, they are able to play a key role actually in supporting victims of gender-based violence. Those are some of the key pointers we have picked up at this point. Sheila, I don't know if I should hand back to you.
Yes, here. Elizabeth. So where do we go from here? We have the pointers. Where do we go from here?
Yes, of course, as we did in the last gender forum, we did have a debrief as an institution. So that's going to be one of those things. We need to locate where each of these actions in our different projects falls, but also in the institutional plans. I need to assure you that this is something that is important, and the gender forum continues to be an important platform for us to hold leaders accountable, to have us reconvene and reflect, to unlearn and relearn. So from these, some of the actions that I've kept on talking about, you'll see some of the actions beginning almost immediately on Monday through the different projects, but also for those that are long-term, we'll continue reaching out to some of you here, our activists the NGOs in this space, government representatives here to ensure that we are able to implement this. But just to assure you that this is not something that is just going to end up in any of our reports and closing. So these are things that we are going to action. Thank you.
Thank you so much. That is Elizabeth. Elizabeth is the advocacy manager. For somebody who has really wrapped up that day. She's the advocacy manager at FIDA. Thank you, Liz. You have really wrapped it well, ranging from the money issues, the community mechanisms, the partnerships and linkages, working with government, and so on. And also helping us understand from here, where is this information going and how is it going to be used? So thank you very much, Liz. And of course, the FIDA team as a whole. Thank you, Lillian. Yeah, are we clapping? Hey. The last energy is for Lydia. The last smile is for Miss Nabirio Lydia. We have to keep at our best until the end. I would want to invite Miss Nabirio Lydia. Lydia, come and I introduce you nicely. People, the last energy, the last smile, the last clap is for Lydia. So Lydia is a senior member of FIDA. We clap for that one. She served as a CEO, a board member in the 2000s, around, yes. 2014 to 2016, that is Lydia. But when I was asking Lillian about Lydia, Lillian said this is a person who stood with FIDA, supported FIDA in its most difficult time. That is the lady standing before you. If we never said thank you, today, Lydia, we say thank you very much. And it's on shoulders of people like Lydia that many of us have stood. So Lydia, thank you. But now she works as the Principal Development Officer, Rights, in the Ministry of Gender. Lydia, you have heard. Elizabeth has wrapped it up nicely. Would want you just to thank on behalf of FIDA and to also close this National Gender Forum 2024. Please join me. One last clap, second last to Lydia.
Thank you, Sheila, and thank you, CEO, for those wonderful remarks about me. On behalf of FIDA Uganda, and on my own behalf, I would like to thank you most sincerely for honoring our invitation and bearing with us up to this time. It's almost 5 and I still see the energies still very high. I think because we are discussing an area that is of interest to many of us as we move to discuss our theme of from commitments to investments. So thank you so much, our team of panelists, the various panels that we had. Thank you to our keynote address speaker, Dr. Sali in absentia, and Mr. Sewa Chirianga, who made those wonderful remarks. To our Honorable Minister, who was the chief guest to this event, also the minister from where I work now, so that's my minister, and our chairperson, who gave us very clear achievements of FIDA, but in those slogans, which I believe many of you won't forget. So mine is sincere, just a short one to thank you. The organizers, Lillian and her team, the team of moderators, and all of you for a job well done. So I promise that as a FIDA member, I will continue to support this work from where I work and from my other spaces that I occupy. I think I've influenced some people to join legal aid out of the students that I teach back at the Law Development Center. Some of them have joined legal aid because of the interest I made to them that is very much impressive to support the poor. Because what they offer you are prayers. But those prayers go straight to God, and the blessings can come over the years, and money can't pay for that. So thank you so much for everything. We commit to take these recommendations forward, but also to work together. I think you saw the linkage from grassroots to the national and taking everything to the international level. It's the only way we can achieve gender equality, make sure that all these aspects of access to justice for everyone, inclusion of everyone, persons with disabilities, children, the women in the rural areas, the women in the urban areas, all of this needs to be done, working together through a sectoral approach. So we commit to have that, and with all those few or many words, I thank all of you for keeping alive and awake up to this time and for the commitment to this work. And I take this opportunity to close the National Gender Forum 2024 for God and my country.
For God and my country. Thank you very much, Ms. Naririo. Thank you so much. We're going to stand up. We finished. We're going to stand up. Stand up. But,
So, could all the ladies in a white shirt come to the front? Now that everybody's standing up, please come forward. It is a directive. Yes, yes. White shirts with a feeder logo. Quick, quick, quick. We are in unpaid care time. So, ladies and gentlemen, allow me to introduce this. It's only part of the team. We are over 100 members of staff across the country. But I would have cheated these young ladies if I did not thank them for a job well done. I have been on leave, and I came back and I found this. And gentlemen, Trevor, and there's another gentleman that I think, many other gentlemen, Geoffrey and Rika, sorry. So this is the feeder team that put this together. I think they deserve a loud hand clap. Thank you very much, team. I always say that I'm very proud to be associated with you, and you know that I mean that. I am because we are. Thank you. And to the board, thank you for supporting us. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Lillian. We have closed.
And I didn't thank the moderator. Thank you very much, Sheila, for a job well done. The interpreter for standing with us the whole day. Thank you very much. UN Women, I don't know that you're still in the room. Thank you for the partnership through the last, I believe, 12 years. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Lillian. Thank you. God bless you, Johnny Mercedes. I've been advised that you will receive messages on your phone to contribute a little bit to the transport. Thank you. So check your phones, African Vending Systems. Make sure that you have that message. If you don't, please speak up. Just a small contribution to your transport to bring you here. God bless. Thank you very much.